Hello, today we're going to be doing a video about my 1980 BMW M535i. I've been really excited to do a video about this car since, well, forever. I've owned it for 17 years, and I did do a video many years ago in the beginnings of YouTube. It's still up right now. I'll put a link in the description, but it's kind of funny now that I look at it. But we're going to do a little more in-depth video today and talk about the car and the journey to bring it back from the brink of rust and obsolescence and poor bodywork and a hard life, and it's been quite the journey to restore it. The car's already a little bit warmed up. I drove over here from my house, so continue to get it warmed up a little bit. I'm shifting through the close ratio dog leg transmission here, so first gear is down, down and to the left, and away we go. So the E12 M535i was built between 1980 and 1981. It is a pretty rare car. It was never brought to the United States officially. So the only ones here, including my car, were brought in the 1980s privately as gray market cars, or maybe one or two have been brought in since the 80s, maybe in the 90s or even the 2000s. Obviously now it's a lot easier to bring them in because they're over 25 years old and you don't have to worry about emissions or DOT stuff. But anyway, they made 1,410 of these cars. 960 of them were left-hand drive. They did make some special versions in South Africa as well that aren't included in that 1,410. And what's special about this car that I've told many people about over the years, and all my friends in the BMW group are probably sick of me talking about, is that this is car number 18 of the 1,400 made. So it's one of the oldest still on the road, as far as I know. I've owned it since 2003. When I found out this car was for sale, it only had European bumpers on it. It didn't have any of the spoilers that I'll show later. It was in pretty bad shape, and worse shape as I found out when I went to go buy it. Flew down to Atlanta to buy it, and I lived in Chicago at the time, and I drove it back. But I wasn't quite sure if it was real. He didn't provide the VIN number, and so when I got on the phone with him and I asked him a few questions, I was looking for an E12 M535i. I had an E12 before that. I had a 528i and the US spec version with the big bumpers, and I always wanted the M535 because it was so rare and it was one of the original motorsport cars that was built by BMW. So I asked him about it, and I asked him about the shift pattern. I asked him where first gear was, and he told me it was down and to the left. So I knew it was likely the right car, and it was a real one. Then I asked him for the VIN number, and when he told me the VIN number ended in 4145018, I knew not only was it real, but that it was the 18th one built, and I was pretty excited about that. Fast forward, I flew down in April of 2003 to go buy this and drive it back to Chicago, and oh boy, the car really had a hard life. It had pine needles all over the place because they parked it outside under a pine tree. It had sap all over the paint in various spots. As I found out later too, whenever you drive it, there was an ant colony somewhere in the front of the car, in the engine bay somewhere, and you would drive and little ants would start crawling all over the hood because you were disrupting their sleep or their restful period. They weren't too happy about that. It had a bent trailing arm on the left side, so when you would make right-hand turns with the positive camber that it had, it would kind of heel over a bit in an awkward way. damage on the left rear quarter that had never been repaired from their son backing it into a post. And what else? One of the main things was it had power window switches down here by the shifter, but the power window switchers didn't control anything because the car originally came with crank windows. So someone had started to do a conversion to power windows and then stopped, but not until they cut apart the center console, put in all these switches and wiring, and then they put in power window switches in the door panels, cutting holes in the door panels. But the crank window, the cranks were still there for the manual window. So it was an abomination. Shortly after that, maybe a year later, I ended up tackling an engine rebuild because I had a big oil leak that started, and decided to rebuild the engine and embark on that journey. That was a year and a half journey, having the engine out. These cars came with the 3453 cubic centimeter engine, also known as the M90, also known by some as the L block. It's a short stroke, big bore engine. It likes to rev. It's very closely related to the M30 engines and like a 535IS, or like my red car that I have a video about. But it's the block is shared with the M1, which is pretty cool. It was also put in some 7 Series and some 6 Series cars, and some later 5 Series E28 cars as well. But this is really one of its most famous incarnations is in the E12 M535i. Made it to the close ratio gearbox and a limited slip rear end. The car being 40 years old, it moves. Them when I first got the car, and I got a fair amount of records through them. So they sent the records to me and printed them off. But it's really funny when I talked to the guy on the phone. I never forget him saying, it's just a Euro 535. And that's all it is. It's not an M5. It's just a Euro 535i. And I started to argue with them about what an E12 M535 represented and how rare these cars were and how significant they were to BMW Motorsport. And he was just, it's just a Euro 535. Just an old Euro 535. So the car had just gone down this path where it was underappreciated and unloved, although they had definitely spent some money on it. One of the receipts was for a replacement rear subframe, which I can't imagine why you'd have to replace the subframe. But then again, the car also had a bent trailing arm, so I think someone maybe their son had some tail out action and hit a curb or something and bent the trailing arm. It seemed like every time I worked on the car or did something, I found more rust. Rust in the doors when I undid the hack job with the power window switches, rust in the rear shock towers when I was messing around in the trunk and looking at stuff, rust and poor body repair in the front where it had been hit, had a front end collision and the hood didn't fit right, and the radiator support on the passenger side, the headlight where it fits in didn't fit right, and the parts for the trunk floor. Oh, that's another thing. These cars tend to pull the diff mount away from the trunk floor because they have so much torque from this motor, and that's a weak point, so the sheet metal actually tears away from underneath the trunk floor where the diff mounts. And that had happened to this car, and somebody decided to weld in a big metal plate and then bolt the diff to the metal plate with these big long lags like you'd use at the hardware store. So when you pulled up the trunk floor, there was this metal plate about this big, and it had 4 bolts through it holding the diff together. So I knew that had to be replaced, and the trunk floor had to be redone. But I also grabbed a new radiator shroud and cowl, radiator support in the front, because like I said, the car had been hit in the front and never repaired properly. I got a brand new hood, held on to that for many, many years, dragging it around to 2 different moves from Chicago when we eventually moved to Minnesota. So I had this pile of body parts, and in 2013 I dropped it off at Sears Auto Body. They're affiliated with the Mercedes dealer. They used to have BMW as well here in the Twin Cities, and they had done some work on old BMWs, and I took it to them, and we started cutting into it. They started cutting into the back and found all the rust, cut out one of the quarter panels and the driver's side, and showed me how extensive the rust in the Bondo was. When I had the fenders rolled to put these BBS wheels on when we lived in Chicago, they had covered a bunch of Bondo in the left quarter panel. So that was yet another time that I realized how much rust and poor fixes this car had in its life. But anyway, they cut in, and we started from there. We started doing the back third of the car. So they cut the car apart pretty much all the way to the back window and rebuilt the entire trunk floor, the spare tire well, inner fender liners, shock towers, quarter panels, got brand new tail lights around. I mean, everything in the back. New trunk lid. Someone in their brilliance had decided to cut into the trunk, probably because they locked their keys in the car, and had taken a hole saw underneath the roundel in the trunk, because remember, it didn't have the spoiler. And they cut a perfect circular hole underneath the BMW roundel. And when I got ready to put the trunk spoiler on, I found that out early on, that there was a hole underneath there, and someone had used duct tape to cover the hole. It was just ridiculous. So I got a brand new trunk lid, and they rebuilt the whole back of the car. Had it about another year, and I took the rest of the car apart and took the motor out again and gutted the interior, gutted the dashboard and everything, and brought it back to them as a roller. And we started on the front 2/3 of the car and put on new doors, and even had to replace the firewall. There was rust in the firewall. There was rust in the transmission tunnel. They did all that. And it was another extremely long journey to put all that in, and then they started on the paint, and we did all the paint in original Alpine White 1, single stage paint, no clear coat. I had them roll the fenders at the same time, and then I got it back and I started reassembly, which took me a few years, just with lots of priorities and family commitments. So that's the drive in the E12 M535i. You can see it's a pretty quick, fun car. We're going to do an outside walk around and point out some things and talk about the interior and talk about a few more things. So, see you in a minute. Alright, we've driven it. Now let's talk about my 1980 M535 a little more in depth. As I covered quite a bit and showed some pictures, you can see the extent of the restoration. During that time, there are some other things that I addressed. Some are done, some are not quite finished. So the headlight cleaning system I purchased many years ago from a wrecked M535, and I have all the wiring and the relays, but unfortunately it's still not hooked up. I did try hooking it up and it was blowing a fuse, so still have to sort that out, but all the pieces are there. The pumps are in good shape, the nozzles, the grills. There's a special grill that you can get from BMW and they're no longer available. Extremely hard to find now. You can take stock grills and you can cut the holes in them and the notches for the wipers and the nozzles, but let's be honest, who wants to do that? Getting the grills a few years ago before they went out of stock was a good move on my part, so I'm glad I did that. Another thing that I really love and kind of geek out about is on the roundel on these older BMWs. I don't know if it's made out of porcelain, but it's not the plasticky, very smooth, non-embossed version that you see on modern BMWs. This one, and even BMWs in the 80s have the, I would call it the cheaper roundel. The earlier ones you can still get from some places, and that's what this is. So when you touch it, it actually, the lettering is different, it's a different font, and it's more embossed and you can feel a lot more texture. The yellow lights were in addition as well. They are pretty hard to find, especially because I wanted the flat face versions. Both the high beams and the low beams have flat faces versus a convex curved face, but you need the flat face to have the headlight cleaning system work. What else can I talk about here? When I did do the restoration, I did not reuse the windshield. The old windshield was pretty pitted, pretty old, and I don't know if it was original in the car, but it had a lot of miles on it. I did source a Euro E12 M5 windshield with the green stripe on the top. Pretty hard to find now, and it fits perfectly in the E12, so that was a good add. Let's see what else. Well, obviously the stripe kit, so let's talk about that real quick. Really excited. I just had it put on yesterday. I've been holding on to this stripe kit for several years. Before that, I thought I had found the stripe kit for sale from BMW, but it ended up being a much thinner pinstripe that was not the correct width and correct style that these stripes are. Unfortunately, after many years of searching on eBay and having a saved search and trying to find an original stripe kit, because it was long since out of production from BMW, I managed to find one wide stripe for one of the doors in probably 10 years of eBay searches. So what this is a reproduction kit from a guy in Germany who sells E12 parts. It seems very spot on to me. I'm very happy with the quality, and I took it to an auto graphics vinyl place yesterday that does like commercial vehicles, and they also do auto wraps. And they put it on yesterday. I had a lot of pictures of various E12 M535i's with the stripe kit, including the blue E12 M535i that BMW has in their museum with the stripes. So the installer, Lee, had a pretty good time of it with using the pictures that I had supplied. The wheels are one of the highlights, I think, of the car, what I've done with it. When I did the body and paint restoration, I had them roll the fenders front and rear at the same time to make sure that everything fit right. I've never had any trouble with the fitment, but they are quite wide. It's a pretty big stance. The rears are 16 by 9 inch wheels, DBS RS, with 245, 45, 16 tires. It's a 911 turbo fitment from the 80s. And the fronts are 16 by 8. I think they're ET11 offset, and they are 225, 50, 16 tires on that, which typically you see the 225s on the rear and a 205 on the front. So this is definitely a pretty upsized package on here, but I think it rides great. Overall, just the car in general, since completing the restoration, is surpassed my expectations by far. I was worried that the car was going to have some squeaks and rattles, or just never really feel like it was the same after such extensive body work. And honestly, it drives like a brand new car. It is, I can't believe it's 40 years old. It is so tight. It is so planted. There are no squeaks and rattles. It is just solid, and it feels like it's just welded and seam welded together, even though I didn't have them do the seam welding. But it came together beautifully, and for as extensive bodywork as has been done on this, I dare say it might be better than new, and I'm surprised by that, given how good the factory got it back in the day. But maybe modern bodywork techniques and seam sealer. Not saying I'm going to drive it in the rain if I can help it, and definitely not drive it in the snow in Minnesota, but it's really put together well. I'm really happy with it. Now we're looking at the back of the car, obviously. I want to show off the stripes in the rear, point out a couple things, like the license plate. I've always loved that plate, and some other trim items that we did. So when the back of the car was rebuilt, the trunk floor and the rear taillight panel, that assembly has a different tow hook, which is an updated tow hook. One of my friends pointed this out when the car was undergoing body work. So the original tow hook was a little bit less obtrusive than this. It doesn't bother me that much, but I mean, someone who really knows could probably point out that this car has had something done to it, because that's not original. You can see the stripe goes along the bottom of the spoiler. The spoiler is quite large. It's all rubber. It's fairly compliant when you push on it. I mean, it's like really thick rubber. Try to minimize sun exposure if I can, so that it's not going to dry out too much. It's already a little bit dry, but it's not cracked or bad at all, which is really fortunate, because these spoilers are impossible to find. When we did the body work, I also fitted a brand new Euro rear bumper. The one that the car had was pushed into the center, and I honestly can't remember if it was like that when I got the car, or if I did it one time backing into the garage in Chicago and got a little too close to the tires I had stacked up behind it. But anyway, didn't want to mess with that bumper. It had a little bit of rust, so this is a completely brand new bumper, which is a ginormous pain in the ass to get from BMW, because they make you jump through all these hoops for any European part. I thought about doing a Super Sprint exhaust. It didn't come together in time for the build, and I had already gone down the path of getting some of these parts, and I didn't want to start all over and spend more money on different exhaust parts. So we went with the stock exhaust. I think it sounds pretty good. It's big, it's heavy, there's a couple of resonators in there, but I'm just happy to have the car running right now, and I'm going to stick with it. Let's look at the interior. As part of the restoration, I redid the entire interior. Did not do the dash. There's a long story there, but you can't find crack-free dashes anymore. You can't buy them from BMW, and the places that repair them or claim to repair them, they have flaws. So I left it with the cracks. You can see two big cracks there in the center. It's unfortunate. The rest of it's pretty good though, so I stuck with it. But the main thing was getting these seats recovered was a bear. This original black corduroy fabric is nearly impossible to get. I say nearly because had a little bit of a system that I got some friends to help me with from the E28 board. For some reason, this fabric is available from BMW, but it's on a ban list, and you can't import it to the US. I don't know if it's using some kind of chemical back in the day that the EPA doesn't like, but I just don't get it. So what happened was, I had a good friend who actually put this into his carry-on luggage on the plane coming to the US, and then he passed it on to another friend of mine who will remain nameless, and that friend mailed it to me. So in that way I was able to get 8 meters of this stuff, and it was plenty of fabric for Denny at Mark's Auto Upholstery in South St. Paul. Wonderful job he did recovering these seats, and he also did the headliner. Brand new headliner fitted. That headliner came from World Upholstery, but Denny fitted it. Denny hadn't worked on really any old BMWs. I think he'd done some old Mercedes, but mostly muscle cars. And Denny at Mark's Auto Upholstery in South St. Paul, phenomenal job. Totally recommend him. These are original Recaro seats from the factory, one of the few BMWs ever to have Recaro seats. So again, I really wanted someone who knew what they were doing to recover these seats for me. I don't have floor mats in here right now. I have them on order from Coco Mats. I think they're supposed to come next week, and they're going to be black and white checker. And then the last thing we did is, this is a reproduction Alpina dead pedal from an E28 or an E12. Had that fitted. When they did the body work, I had them weld in a stud to the floor there that pokes up through the carpet, so it's mounted on the bottom, and then it mounts on the top. You can't really see, but up underneath the kick panel there's a screw that holds it in. The last thing I need to finish that's not done quite yet, the sunroof is not wired in. The switch still needs to get cut into the headliner and then hooked in. But the sunroof panel is in, it's on the track, everything's set. The switch is just not operational right now. Here's a view under the hood. It's not quite as clean as it was a few years ago. Right after the body, or not the body, right after I did the engine and rebuilt it, it was really pristine, and it's gotten a little dirty over the years. I could probably stand to detail it. I thought I'd give you a look at the car underneath and show off some of the cleanliness from the restoration while things are still pretty, at least. So we do have a few oil leaks we're chasing. I did just notice too that I think I've got a power steering fluid leak, so there's always something to deal with. The front subframe and rear subframe were painted powder coated black, so that looks real nice. New steering tie rods. As I mentioned on my, well, I didn't think I mentioned in the video, but I talked about it on my website that I did have the whole transmission resealed a few weeks ago, so we're pretty close to bone dry there. We're still missing an exhaust bracket there that we're trying to maybe fab something that'll go to those downpipes. Some more to come there. Let's look at the back of the car. I did not powder coat the diff, so that is on the to-do list. I would like to take the diff out, reseal it. It's got a little bit of a weep. As you can maybe see, it's a little bit wet on the back. Reseal it, powder coat it black, because right now everything else is nice and black. New suspension technique sway bars here too. Whole rear subframe and trailing arms were powder coated black during the restoration. A little bit hard to see maybe in here, but those are urethane subframe mount bushings that I got from Ireland Engineering. Put those in at the same time. That's probably about all there is to show back here. It's just very clean. You get an appreciation for all the body work and undercoating that's gone into this. So that's my car. I hope it was an interesting story that I told. This car has a lot of stories behind it and a lot of troubled past that we've rectified through throwing money at it over the years and getting the restoration done, getting all the work done, but I am ecstatic with the result. If you're thinking of restoring an E12, I would not recommend it. It's extremely difficult to find parts. BMW just isn't that supportive of the car like they would be of an E30 M3, for example, or even the newer M3s. It's becoming really hard to find parts on the E12s, and finding competent people to do the body work and everything you want. These cars have a lot of rust typically, and it's a slippery slope. So I'm very happy with how the car turned out. I never plan to sell the car. I've had it this long, 17 years, and I hope to pass it on to my son, who's a big fan of it. He's driven it himself, and he doesn't even have his driver's license yet. He's driven it up and down the parking lot, practicing his stick shift skills. So thanks for watching.